Great. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thanks for joining us for today's presentation, Successful Transitions to Memory Care with David Troxel. My name is Julie Robb, and I am the Community Relations Representative here at Ida Culver House, Broadview. And I am going to be your host today for this webinar. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple things. All of your microphones will be muted. We ask that you keep them muted throughout the presentation just to minimize any interruptions that we might have, just for better sound quality. To ask questions during this presentation, please use the chat feature, which is down at the bottom of your screen. You can type in your question there, and then we're going to have David answer questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, just type it in there and we'll get to it at the end. I also want to let you know that we are recording this presentation so we can send it out to folks that weren't able to join us today. Let's see. I think that I would just like to talk a little bit about today's presentation and about Ida Culver House Broadview. A little bit about Era Living Memory Care. We offer secure in-home environment at 2 Era Living retirement communities, Ida Culver House Broadview in Northwest Seattle and the Gardens at Town Square in downtown Bellevue. Here at Ida Culver House Broadview, we are actually getting pretty close to the end of a very large project that we have been working on to complete a total of 44 memory care apartments that we have here. Second floor of the terrace has been complete and open now since about the first week of June. And we're looking about second or third week of September for completion of the second floor. So that it has been a very, very exciting and rewarding project that we've been working on. And we have been using the best friends approach in conjunction with David Troxel to work with our residents here in the terrace. And it's been really, really successful so far. Both of these communities also offer independent and assisted living on our campuses. If you are interested in learning more about any of our communities or the terrace at either the Gardens at Town Square or Ida Culver House Broadview, please feel free to visit our website, eraliving.com/memorycare. All right, and now we are honored to host David Troxel, who will be presenting on successful transitions to memory care. Mr. David Troxel has become internationally known for his writing and teaching with the fields of Alzheimer's disease and long-term care. He has co-authored with Virginia Bell 6 influential books and articles relating to dementia care, including his book, The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. So David, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be with us. So I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be with you all. And I guess I do need to get a little bit more recent picture. That one looks like my vanity picture from 20 years ago when I had a lot more black hair. But thank you for finding that on the web somewhere. I don't know if that's the one I sent or not. It's great to be with you. And I do see some familiar faces in the pictures in the chat room, or pardon me, for our gallery of students before we get going. I just wanted to say that, it's been an honor for me to be part of this, I think, 5-part series that Era Living has sponsored. I think we have one more to go, and to really cover some contemporary trends about Alzheimer's and dementia care. As you all know, I'm a writer. I'm co-developer of the Best Friends approach to Alzheimer's care, but I think perhaps more of interest is that I've had a long career in day center settings and university settings, and about half my career with the Alzheimer's Association. Today, I work as a writer and consultant, happy to be consulting to Era Living, but I've also been a family member. My mom, Dorothy, passed away in 2008 with Alzheimer's disease, and she actually lived in memory care assisted living for 3 years. So I feel like I've kind of been on all sides of this equation. I always like to do a little shout out, and forgive me, a few of you have heard me mention this on multiple times during this seminar, but I live in Sacramento, California, but I have a real heart for the Pacific Northwest. I went to a little college called Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, where I had a lot of roommates from the Seattle area and friends. And so it's always great to kind of send my well wishes to the Pacific Northwest and be with all of you in Seattle. Hopefully, Julie, I'll be able to visit you all in person if the world gets a bit better, and maybe see you, if not later this year or maybe next year. So with that kind of opening remark, let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going on this topic, which I hope you'll find of interest today. Talking about successful transitions to memory care. What happens after you make a move into assisted living memory care for your family member. And so let's see if I can get my PowerPoint to move here. So today we'll cover just a quick review of some of the benefits of memory care. Why do people choose to put a family member into memory care, which is often at the assisted living level? Whoops, pardon me. There we go. Sorry, I just moved my slide by accident. Okay, a quick review of the benefits of memory care. I'm also then going to talk about something that I don't think gets talked about enough, which is what happens after the move is made. There's so much energy and sometimes a lot of family angst and worry about making the placement, but what then? And I have to say, as an industry all across the country, I think sometimes professionals in long-term care, we drop the ball and maybe not orienting families a bit more about what to expect, some do's and don'ts and some ideas. I'll talk about some questions that I often get asked: how often to visit and what to do when I visit. And then also about the collaboration with staff. And you'll notice I use the word collaboration there because sometimes there's a lot of challenges for the family members to work with staff and know who to talk to about different things. In an ideal world, we have more of a collaborative relationship where we're kind of working with the staff to provide the best care. Because one thing I will say is, once you make a placement to memory care, it's not like your role is done. You still have a lot of coordination to do, a lot of connecting with staff, and hopefully have a positive relationship with the team to help them work with you to deliver the very best care for your family member. All right, so again, just taking 5 minutes here because I don't want to take a lot of our time up from the topic at hand, but why does someone choose memory care? And just to recap, most people with dementia are still cared for at home for much of their illness. But you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've also, when you've met one family, you've met one family. I'm an only child. I had a very small network of people who could help my mom when she was still living at home. My father was still alive back then. Some people have large families who are very cooperative, working well together, others don't. Certainly more and more, we often see people with Alzheimer's disease or one of the other dementias, pardon me, living by themselves. And so again, the struggle of someone living alone. So two issues that I always kind of drill down on when families say, when is the time to make the move? I call them, for me, the two S's: safety and socialization. Certainly safety can become an issue when someone has a progressive dementia where cognition's declining. If the person's living alone, they may or may not be taking their medications properly. Probably they aren't. They're at risk for falls, accidents, leaving the stove on, running over the bathtub, actually wandering away from the house in an unsafe space. Maybe someone wakes up at 4 a.m. on a cold Seattle day and thinks they're late for work and they walk out the door. That can be very dangerous. And then the growing concern around, financial abuse. I'm so sickened by this, but, seniors in general are often targets of these scammers, these fake Social Security calls and IRS calls and even letters that come in that are bogus, that have a bogus bill that people pay. And when you have dementia, judgment suffers. So sometimes people with dementia are really disproportionately impacted by these scams. So safety is a big issue. I haven't talked about caregiver safety, but I probably should add that to the slide. There are times when the dementia-related behavior includes agitation or anger, and you might have a very frail 80-year-old caring for a robust 85-year-old with dementia, and that can be really tricky if things don't go well. And then also socialization. The best caregiver can only do so much one-on-one at home. And this is why I'm a fan of adult day centers. I'm a fan of trying to hire someone to come into the home who's lively and engaging. And one reason why assisted living, like the communities that are living, do work so well is because you can involve this person in socialization, activities, engagement, things that are good for the brain and good for the body. I think this feeling of neighborhood, of kind of a therapeutic milieu or socialization can be very, very powerful. Again, a few other quick things about kind of what might trigger an issue for families. it's a myth that everybody with Alzheimer's disease somehow is violent or combative, but certainly things can happen. So if you are having challenges managing dementia-related behavior, fatigue, lack of sleep, that's a big one. If your family member is getting up all during the night and you're not sleeping, it's very hard to remain an effective family member and a care partner. Increasing social isolation for the family member. I've met family members who've had to give up so much of their life to be a caregiver, even, of course, before the pandemic and now during the pandemic. And so there is a sense that for many of us as family members, making a placement into memory care can help kind of preserve some of your ability to be out in the world and out in community. And of course, difficulty organizing or pulling off personal care, including bathing and taking someone to the bathroom, changing briefs, all of that can be very daunting and difficult for family members. This last bullet we can maybe talk more about in the discussion, but I think sometimes even the best caregivers become the bad guy. You're the one taking away the car keys, taking away the checkbook, saying no to somebody. And often because their judgment is impaired, their reasoning is impaired, they may think you're deliberately trying to hurt them or have some paranoia that can be difficult. And so sometimes when you do get help in, when you use services, don't wait to use services, you can kind of position yourself to get out of that oppositional role with your family member. Pardon me, we've had a lot of fires. We still have fires in the Sacramento area, and we've had a little bit of smoke in the air, which has gone right into my lungs here. So memory care benefits, again, before we get into the kind of whole concept of what to do after the move, hopefully you will find a place where the staff are well trained, they can handle personal care with more success. A memory care community can create a therapeutic environment rich in activity and engagement. And you can focus on friendly visits instead of the elements of care that have been so difficult. Okay, now let's kind of jump into the topic at hand here. What to do after a move to memory care? So maybe not necessarily in order of importance. I wanted to kind of give you some key concepts here, and I'll look forward to some discussion and maybe even some debate about some of these. But as I intimated early, every family situation is different. So as a memory care consultant, one thing I've learned, which has been a bit humbling over the years, is, I don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. There's not one answer for any situation. Everybody is different, right? And so when someone says to you, oh, everybody with dementia should do this, or every family member should do that, maybe there are some things that are true, but by and large, I want you to focus on your individual person, their strengths, their challenges, your own family network, and make this sort of intuitive and reasoned decision about some of these things we're going to be talking about. So years ago, for example, people would say now, your mother's moved in, don't visit for 2 weeks, or don't visit for 4 weeks, let her adjust, don't come in. And I have to say, I've never really liked that recommendation. I think for some people that might actually be a good idea if you've had a super contentious move in and the person's desperate to get home. But in general, I know with my mother, we visited her right away. We were reassuring her. We were hanging out with her, doing things with her, saying, oh my goodness, Mom, look at this beautiful spa, this beautiful hotel you're in. You're so lucky to be here right now. What a great place. And just being with her, I think, helped her and helped us. So again, remember that each situation is difficult. Each situation is different, and focus on your own family strengths. Be sure to participate in any initial care planning and then ongoing regular care planning sessions. If you feel that you need one, ask for one. Now, every state has different regulations, and forgive me, I'm not really up on Washington states, but in California, when someone moves to memory care, typically there's a care plan that's created, and usually a good community will update it maybe twice a year doing the regs, maybe every quarter, or what they call upon change of conditions. So if Mom moves into memory care, and you do the care plan and assessment, and a month later things have changed, or 3 weeks later things have changed, they'll do another care plan. Ask to be involved in this so you can kind of meet the key players. At a place like Era Living, it's usually a collaborative process. There might be 2, 3, 4 people involved in creating the care plan. And even if you have to go zooming in these days, be part of it so you can say, well, what are your care goals? What kinds of activities do you think Mom would enjoy? What are your plans? What are you going to be focusing on? Maybe it's diet and nutrition if someone has diabetes or other kinds of things, but I want you to be an informed consumer. And then do complete any social history and life story forms as soon as possible. Those of you who've been part of my lecture series know that a key element of my own philosophy is that it's very important to know the person well with dementia. We have to become their biographers in many ways because they've forgotten so much of their history, right? So if I'm ever in memory care, I want someone to bring me a good cup of Starbucks coffee every morning, maybe talk about my career as a writer, talk about the fact that I was actually born in Paris, France. My dad was in the Air Force and I have a real affinity to France. Maybe they'll show me pictures of the Louvre and Mona Lisa, things like that during my stay there. So again, you want to know a lot about them. So companies will often give you a set of forms. For example, here are some from Era Living, which I really like. They have one called My Life Story, printed on a beautiful pieces of paper where it talks about, someone's interest in dancing, movies, sports, some of the highlights of their life and career. They even have a little top 10 things at Era Living, which I think is very creative. So here we have Sue. She was a labor and delivery nurse, an avid gardener and passionate about tulips, grew up on a farm and loves chickens, snow skied until she was 81. How about that? A family historian, has more than 50 photo albums that she loves looking at. She hates cats, loves talking about her oldest grandson, Jay, who lives in Toronto. Favorite color, purple. Favorite treat is chocolate ice cream, and volunteered at the symphony for 25 years. Now, if you can imagine that this top 10 card is sort of an easy reference for staff, you see, if I'm taking care of Sue, I know to put on some classical music in her room, ask her about her grandson, bring her a treat of chocolate ice cream, maybe after her shower, or talk about growing up on a farm. Was that hard work? And you see, being able to just take a minute or two to kind of form a relationship with the person with dementia, to form this bond, it eases them. It makes them feel like I know them and they know me. And when they relax and feel better about this relationship, everything goes better. I'm trying to be a best friend to the person with dementia at Era Living. And you take that minute or two to be a little less task-oriented, a little bit more person-centered, and everything goes better. So my long-winded statement here is, if Era Living or whatever organization you're working with, if they give you a card like this, please, please, please get it done in a hurry. It's a huge disadvantage for the staff if they don't know anything about a new resident. They really want to use this to deliver good care, okay? So let's now talk about another kind of hot topic, which often people ask me about: the length and frequency of visits. And again, this is something where I've kind of resisted saying now visit, every other day, 3 days a week for 47 minutes. I think it just depends on your situation. I have families who visit every day and feel great about that. Maybe they even live in the same building and independent living in memory care, or live around the corner. Families who come once a week, families who, for whatever reasons, come once a month. But what I want you to do is make the most of this visit depending on your family situation. So a couple of just sort of general tips here, okay? Devise your own game plan. I don't have a slide about this, but I would definitely, if you have grandchildren who are adults or family members, and maybe they're not visiting, I would definitely ask them to, hey, your grandmother would love to see you. What day do you think you can visit her this week, even for 30 minutes or an hour? Put the ask out there, be as specific as you can. They may or may not, follow through, but do your best. That second bullet I think is important. Short visits are okay. With my mother, sometimes I would come, and when she was in memory care, I'd spend an hour or two with her and be outside and, maybe sit in on an activity with her, maybe be there for a meal. But there'd be times where I might just pop in and say, hey, Mom, I want to come by and say hello. I'm on my way to work. I wanted to come by and give you a big hug and say I love you and say hello. And we would chit chat for a little visit. Funny enough, sometimes when I visit her in the evening, she didn't always want me to go. So I'd say, Mom, I better get home before dark. And she, oh, yes, do get home before dark. So that almost that old maternal instinct would come in. But it's okay to make a short visit. And this third bullet, again, I'm going to be in a judgment-free zone here, but I will give you my opinion in a very neutral way. I have had families say to me very honestly, David, my mother doesn't recognize me. My mother doesn't remember my visits. Why should I still come? Well, I want you to still come. I think it's still important to have that emotional connection, that bond. And I don't have it on the slide here, but another reason to come is, you want to be partnering with the staff. you want to be, holding them accountable if you have some things you want changed or done. But if you're not present, you really can't see the care being delivered, see what's happening. So I think it's very, very essential, if possible, for you to make some regular visits and see what's happening and be, again, part of the team that's helping provide care. Now, another challenge, which sometimes I have with my own mother, is they sometimes don't want you to leave. So work with the staff to develop a strategy. Maybe they can kind of redirect her toward an activity or do something you can kind of sneak out. Now, I have to say, I always felt really guilty and terrible kind of sneaking out sometimes without saying goodbye. But if I made a big, grandiose exit, my mother would want to come with me or get upset that I was leaving. So again, I felt terrible about it in many ways, but I think still the staff assured me that after 10 or 15 minutes or even 5 minutes, my mother may not have even remembered I'd been there. So again, work with the staff. If you're having trouble exiting, you can often kind of figure out a way to make your kind of graceful exit. So again, just to kind of put the pieces together, because I know many of you have been listening to my best friends talk, and really, I think Era Living has been so involved in trying to create this positive culture in, by the way, a very tough staffing environment. It's a national challenge right now to get workers in every industry, particularly long-term care. So I just thought I'd share with you that in the last few weeks, I was actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had my vaccine, so I was braving some travel before the Delta variant got even in worse shape. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in Charlotte, and a dear friend of mine who I've known for 30 years now lives in memory care in Charlotte. Her name is Betsy, and I went to visit her. Now, Betsy and I met through the whole Alzheimer's movement. She had a wonderful, interesting life. She was an airline flight attendant for Eastern Airlines way back when. She was a designer. We did a lot of work in our industry as well as home. She owned a spiffy condo in San Francisco, always very fashionable and put together. And I just had a lovely time. I visited her for about an hour. I don't think she really knew who I was, but the fact that I could reminisce with her and share stories, the fact that I showed her a lot of affection and smiles, she really lit up with my presence. And what was interesting is the staff observed me talking with her about, gee, have you gotten any jobs lately? How's the design business going? And she said, oh no, I need some work. Who do you know? Talking about, living in the San Francisco Bay Area and clothing and fashion and some of the great things. I gave her a lot of praise for so much of volunteer work she did for the Alzheimer's cause over the years. And I noticed the staff were kind of watching me, and I have to say, I did talk to them afterwards, and thank goodness most of them really knew the broad brushstrokes of her biography. But I like to think that maybe some of the things that I did to evoke Betsy's smiles and happiness, maybe they will do after I leave, and ask her more about, being a stewardess back then, a flight attendant, I guess when they wore rather, risque outfits compared to the ones they do today. It was a very different world back then. So again, enjoy your visits, reminisce, talk about different things. Okay. So a few other kind of special topics I want to discuss with you today. Okay. How long should it take someone, how long should it take someone to adjust to their move? It is really a tough thing, I think, to move in general. If I sold this house and moved to a new house or moved to a new community, it's stressful. And when someone has dementia, often they're less resilient. So a move can be difficult. So in general, I like to kind of think about it sort of being about a 30-day situation. Some people, like my mom, actually did really well. And after a few weeks, they seemed very happy and well adjusted. Some people might be 2 or 3 months. But in general, I think the first month is sort of the key one. But it does take different amounts of time for each person to adjust to the transition. Now, again, everyone's a bit different. You might have someone who's actually well aware that they're in memory care, someone who's well aware that they've had to leave their house, someone who maybe has bought into this. They know they can no longer live alone. I mean, I've met people with Alzheimer's living in memory care who say, I don't really want to be here, but it's the best place for me now. But they may still be grieving the loss of their garden, the loss of maybe they had a giant dog that couldn't come with them, or the sense that they've lost, kind of control over much of their life. So again, everyone's a bit different. I give it about a month. Be sure to offer lots of empathy and support. If someone says, I feel terrible, I want to go home, it's okay to say, I would feel the same way, I understand. But I do like to kind of present some constructive language. One of my favorite lines, I think I've mentioned one other webinar for Era Living, Mom, the doctor wants you to be here for now. You need to build your strength. And I think something like that is very affirming. It's true, of course, because almost every elder needs to build their strength. Every elder living in memory care, every person living in memory care has had a doctor's consent. So you're not fibbing, but I think that's a very positive line for families to adopt. Now, don't say, now, Mom, this is your home now. We sold the house, or you need to be here right now. None of us like to be kind of told what to do. And you want to try to be affirming, recognizing that they are experiencing some changes and some losses, but do your best to kind of present a positive voice about this sensitive topic. Now, another question I get asked quite often is, should I take Mom out of the building? Should I take her on an outing? Should I take her to church? Should I take her to a youth soccer game or to a drive-in? So again, no one answer. I feel bad that I'm not being maybe more definitive with you all, but I also want to always be authentic to the great Seattle crowd here on this call. Consult with staff for their best ideas. If you're a bit unsure about whether Mom should leave with you for a few hours, maybe you're afraid she won't go back in, get their best ideas. I would be cautious during the first week or two or the first month, maybe again, let them sort of settle in. The other thing, which I think is so amazing about places like Era Living is, progressive providers. You have this whole beautiful campus. There might be a harp concert in the main lobby. There might be a special meal in the main dining room. Maybe you have a little bistro or cafe somewhere or some nice grounds. So I know Era Living very much embraces this idea that just because someone lives in memory care, it doesn't mean that that's where they have to always stay. Residents at Era Living and in a progressive provider, they are what I like to call citizens of the community, citizens of the community. So if your mother obviously isn't, wildly disruptive or really an aggressive person who's going to try to run out the door, if you can, take her. If you read about something happening on campus, take her to another part of campus, check with the staff, take her to lunch in the main dining room, sit out in the main patio, look at the fountain. I think this is all really very much encouraged. Now, again, COVID may be playing a bit of a challenge to some of this right now, but we hope that we'll soon be beyond the whole COVID restriction piece. But again, feel free to talk to the staff. Maybe they have an extra wheelchair even to help you, but I think this is all really a nice way to kind of have an outing without being quite so risky. But when in doubt, and this is kind of where I want to land on this important topic, the contemporary view of dementia is to live your life. So if you think you might want to take Dad to a baseball game, maybe bring someone to help you. I don't want you to do it by yourself. Give it a shot. What's the worst that will happen? It doesn't go well. The person's upset, the person's agitated, you get them back. Well, the next day or two, it probably won't be remembered. Unless you're making mistakes every day and dragging them to places every day that causes sort of an ongoing emotional message that they're not safe with you. I like to take a chance, and I would take my mom for drives. We put on the satellite radio in the car and listen to music from the 40s. I would take her to a drive-in where we could actually sit in the car and not have to worry about transfers. And we order the cheeseburger or the ice cream and sit there and have a nice outing. I think all of us enjoy an outing, even people with dementia, of course. Successful visiting. A few more things here. This may seem counterintuitive, but if you're visiting your mother and she is forgetful, remember that it's possible she may not quite know who you are. So I would often say, hey, Mom, it's your son, David. How are you? And she would say, I know who you are, but maybe she doesn't. So depending on your situation, again, maybe there's no problem here, but I always just like to do a kind of warm, over the top greeting when I'm visiting a family member, offer lots of smiles and enthusiasm. Again, we know that the language centers of the brain are damaged by dementia. They're reading your face. They're listening to your tone of voice, your emotion. And even if you're having a bad day, if you can notch it up and express this affection and enthusiasm and smile, it does pay dividends. If possible, maybe you don't have to do this every day, but I like to bring some flowers. Maybe you can even bring the loose ones and put an arrangement together. Bring a simple gift. Stop by a local bakery and bring your mom's favorite oatmeal cookies. Anything you can do to have like a little icebreaker, I think can be a nice way to facilitate a successful visit. And of course, I always like to use the best friends approach, and best friends lift each other up. So I might say, hey dad, oh my goodness, it's great to be with you on a beautiful day. I was just thinking about the time you hit that hole in one on the golf course. Wow, wasn't that a fun moment? And you begin laughing and talking about his hole in one, and how the golf games didn't always go. So again, compliment someone, dad, you're the best golfer. You taught me everything I know about golfing. We have to hit the course soon. Things like that, again, are nice ways to kind of break the ice and help with a successful visit. A few other tips here. Consider bringing a project to look at or work on. Maybe you're filing recipe cards, maybe you're putting photos in a photo album, maybe you're doing a quilt or some kind of sewing project you want to bring in and show mom. Anything you can do like this to kind of show them something you're working on, or even have something, maybe you leave behind, maybe you're working on a nice wood puzzle, things like that, or a collage. These are all kind of fun things to do. Again, arrange some flowers in a vase. Perhaps your niece is having her 16th birthday, or you have a new granddaughter. Bring a catalog in and say, mom, we just have a new granddaughter in the family. How about that? I thought I'd maybe buy her some baby clothes. Would you help me pick out the present? And maybe you can even use your iPad or a catalog. And mom, do you like this purple one or this red one? And what do you think? Should I get a size bigger when the baby gets bigger? Or you think just get this size now? Again, things like that. Create a handmade card together. Oh, Sally's having her 40th birthday. I just couldn't find anything in the shop. I brought in some paper. Would you help me? Let's draw one for her. Wouldn't that be fun? She'll love it. A handmade card. Oh my goodness, mother, you are such a good artist. We have really created a masterpiece, right? Wrap a present together. I used to keep wrapping paper in my mom's room, and I'd bring something in. My secretary's having her birthday. Would you help me wrap this? And you want the red paper, the blue paper, the ribbons, and help me do this and do that. And that was a big hit. Look at the family photo album. Again, remember dementia. Don't say, now, mom, I bet you can tell me who this is, or who is that? Who is this? Maybe mom will come up with it, but can also cause some frustration. So, maybe give her a head start. Hey, look, here's Auntie Selma. Look at that wonderful red hat she's wearing. Did she always wear hats? And again, things like that. And again, enjoy any kind of show and tell or things you're working on, or maybe kids, your kids have done some drawings, fun things like this. Again, kind of give you a little bit more of an interactive ability with the visit. Enjoy some good food together or a meal. Again, I don't know what Era Living's doing quite right now with the COVID considerations, but in the past, I would often go and have lunch or dinner with my mom, even help her eat. Bring a favorite treat or food. My mother-in-law is in memory care in Sacramento right now, and she loves hot and sour soup, and she likes matzo ball soup, and she likes spicy food and cheeseburgers. And sometimes I'll bring her a little treat from the outside, so to speak, and she's very happy. Spend time outdoors or in the garden patio. I can't stress enough, even in the Seattle area where I know the weather's dodgy, get them outdoors. When you're outside on a nice sunny day, you get natural vitamin D, it's sensory, it's spiritual. And I used to kind of bundle my mom up sometimes, get a wheelchair, and often even go outside on a not so nice day, because I think it's still very sensory and good for all of our spirits. Taking a walk or exercising. And of course, music is so important because we now know that music and song lyrics actually live in a different part of the brain than words and language. So enjoy music together. I used to watch with my mother the Lawrence Welk show in her room. And I remember as a young person, thinking this is the squarest, most terrible, most awful show. But my mother really enjoyed it. And I have to admit, I kind of got into it too, seeing all the odd like 1960s or 70s fashions and all the pastel clothing and giant hairdos. It was kind of fun. And I think my mother liked it for the music. So maybe you play an old DVD of My Fair Lady, get some CDs in the room or a smart speaker. But music is very therapeutic for people with dementia. It changes your mood, it lifts spirits, it elevates happiness. And again, even with our staff, sometimes I'll encourage them, if someone's very resistive to personal care, to get that smart speaker in the room, play their favorite Dolly Parton tunes, and perhaps then they'll relax, you'll laugh, you'll just sort of dance your way into the shower and everything might be a bit better. Okay, so as we begin to kind of wind down our kind of how to visit and some elements of that successful visiting, I hope you'll have some good questions. I did want to kind of acknowledge where we are today. And You maybe are in a situation where your family member is out of state, or you've been Zooming with lots of different people, and see if your community can actually create a nice schedule for FaceTime or Zoom or other kinds of calls with your family member, okay? And what I'd recommend is, other than you just sort of saying, hey, what's new and what do you have for lunch today, and things like that, maybe even just have some fun. Mom, I was just thinking, you and Dad were such incredible travelers. I want to keep something for my records. How about we do some brain aerobics? Can we come up with a list of all the cities you visited? Can we come up with a list of all the countries you visited? Okay, having some fun. You can even do some, kind of brain teasers, like let's name the capitals of the 50 states, or do as many animals as you can. And if you have a fun list going like this, you can even keep it up week after week. So again, engage the person with some cognitive experiences, okay? Show and tell fashions. Mom, look at this bright red shirt I have on. I hardly ever wear the color red. Do you think it looks good on me? Do you like it? Mom, I have this new goatee, this beard. Do you like it, or should I shave it off? And I used to actually bring in 5 dress shirts and 5 neckties on hangers when my mom lived in memory care. And I'd say, Mom, I've got a busy day at work. Would you help me match my shirts and ties? And she loved it. Because when you ask somebody their opinion, it means you value them, right? So again, little things like this. Menu planning. Mom, you're such a good cook. I don't know what possessed me, but I've got 12 people coming over for dinner next weekend, and I have no clue about what to serve. Would you help me get the menu together? And again, maybe ask your mom for advice about different things. If you're together in person, you could even look at recipe books, or watch a program on cooking, watch some old Julia Child reruns, or Martha Stewart, or something like that. But again, talking with your family member, maybe making a list of their favorite foods or things they don't like, enjoying things like that. And of course, reminiscing. Sometimes those long-term memories really stay pretty crisp in the brain, even when short-term memories fail. So reminisce. Mom, how did you meet Dad? I've been meaning to ask you. Why did you decide to marry him? Now, what's really funny is, like, I asked my mother about this once, and my mother said, oh, darling, her British accent, my mother said, darling, your father was a good dancer, and that's why I married him. And I thought that was really funny. It was very playful. I suspect my mother had other reasons for marrying him besides the fact that he was a good dancer. But even if they tell you something a bit off topic or silly, it's fun to sometimes reminisce and ask more open-ended questions. You can even kind of broaden the questions. Mother, how long did you and Dad date? Now, how long do you think someone should date before they get married? Do you think people should date for at least a year before they get married, or longer? And sometimes these open-ended kind of broader questions can lead to some delightful conversation and funny answers. In our brains, we often can do these sort of old sayings we've kind of imprinted in our brain forever. And I like to go on the internet sometimes and print a list up of all of these different old sayings. In one of my best friend's activity books for the team at Era Living, I actually have a page with all these old animal sayings. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. It's raining cats and dogs. As poor as a church mouse. By the way, that's one I've never quite fully understood. Maybe there's no food in the church, I'm not sure. Cats have 9 lives. And what's really fun is you kind of, do the first part. Your family member can often complete the blank, and then you can have some fun. It's raining cats and dogs. Oh my goodness, Mother, what do you think that means? Where do you think that came from? And of course, in today's world, you could even Google it, and maybe you discover, like I've heard, I don't know if this is true, I've heard that in the Middle Ages, they had the thatched roofs of the houses in England. And when it rained, the dogs and cats would like to sleep on the thatched roofs of the house, the straw roofs, because it was warm. But when it rained, they all jumped off the roof. Now, again, I have no idea if that's actually the true story or not, but you can Google things and actually talk about the origins of these sayings and have some fun with them. Opposites, up and down, salt and pepper, right and left, couples, pairs, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Maybe that should be called pairs versus opposites. So again, some word games like this. Spelling bee, Mom, you're such a good speller, and I want to have some fun. How do you spell, dictionary? And maybe have some fun with this, because again, you're kind of engaging them in a fun activity. It's fun for you, and it is kind of good for the brain, I think, to kind of do some of these things. A few more thoughts about the visiting process here. And I have to say, some of this is from my own experience, but I do think it's kind of nice, you've been going through this tough caregiving time, on your own. And now you have the potential of meeting a lot of other families who have who have their family members at Era Living or whatever setting you're in. So do say hi to the other family members there, get to know them. You might even end up with an informal support group or a buddy to have coffee with or someone to talk to. I know I got to know a number of the families when my mom was here in Sacramento. And after my mother passed away in memory care, after living there for 3 years, my father would sometimes go back to the building to say hello to the staff and say hello to some of the other residents, other family members. It kind of becomes your home too. So, again, get to know people. That's a real plus. And of course, you can form your own little support group. So if you are having some dilemmas or concerns and you can't go to a regular support group, particularly right now, again, you maybe call some people on the list to talk to them about it and get some advice and feedback from someone who's been there. All right. We'll move on to maybe the final topic of this webinar today, collaborating with staff. And as I said at the beginning of this talk, I've really never seen us struggle the way we've been struggling in the last year or so. It's very, very tough to get staff these days to work in long-term care. I think companies like Era Living that are family owned, that have a really good sort of core values, probably are doing pretty well compared to many competitors. But that being said, the staff are really precious, and I want to thank all of you on the chat or on the webinar today who work in this industry. So again, don't hesitate. Introduce yourself to staff. Ask them about themselves. So gee, your name is Daisy. Tell me about it. Who named you Daisy? And where did you grow up? And how long have you lived in Seattle? I think it's really powerful when we kind of extend our friendship to the staff and talk with them and kind of get their input. Be sure, as I mentioned earlier, to share key elements of your family member's life story on an ongoing basis, not just admission. So if you do have a new puppy in the house, a new grandchild, something like that is very powerful. I don't have it on the slide here, but I always like to bring things in. Like if your mother was a quilter, bring in one of her quilts for the staff to see. If your dad won a bunch of golf trophies, maybe bring the trophies in, pictures, educate the staff about how interesting your family member is and their various things they've done. Maybe your father worked for Boeing or your mother worked for one of the early telephone companies. Bring in some fun things about their career. I've already mentioned this, but I think families get a little bit shy, but ask to take part in the initial care plan and ongoing assessments and plan. And if you do have any concerns, ask the team to say, hey, I'm just confused about my mom's diagnosis, or I'm confused about what's happening with her activities. My mother says that she hasn't eaten in 3 days, when of course she has. Can we put together a little care plan meeting? I'd love to just get everyone's input and see how things are going and understand what's new at the building. And again, that's something that always will be done for you. Learn who to talk to with questions or concerns. And I guess having been a family member in memory care, I mean, most family members were wonderful, but there were a few who were really hard on the staff. And it kind of broke my heart when someone would chew out, a CNA for the lunch that was being served, the menu. I mean, they're not responsible for that. So, treat people with kindness, of course, but, kind of get your pecking order down so you know who to talk to about meds and who to talk to about dining. Often the executive directors, of course, are very available for you, but do try to understand who to talk to and don't take it out on the everyday staff who really may be on, maybe the DVD for the television has been broken for 2 weeks. That may not be the CNA's fault that that's the case. So if you're concerned, do that. And then of course, be an advocate for your family member. You're paying good money for care. You want them to get good care. Be an advocate, ask questions, but stay positive. I think again, to be overly critical and, in a negative space, even though I know some of us just have so much anxiety about our family member and hopes and issues, I think it doesn't necessarily advance the cause for you or your family member. It doesn't really lead to a constructive relationship. I wanted to just kind of pause a bit at the very end here and just talk a bit about the kind of caregiving experience. Even with me working in the field, it was very painful to have my mother move into memory care. I knew she'd never leave, and it was sad for me. And sometimes I had to kind of recognize that things were changing a bit beyond my control. So just a few tips here. when it comes to your expectations, recognize that this is a world of people living with dementia. And guess what? No matter how great the building is, how great the staff is, things move around. Another resident might be wearing your mom's bathrobe and your mom might be wearing their slippers. Sometimes people enter the wrong room. Again, you have to understand that the best program just can't prevent these things. Not only that, if someone's, put on someone else's hat, we don't want to confront them and demand they give it back to us on the spot. What we'll do, of course, is at the end of the evening, you kind of gently pick things up and move things back and around. So just remember that this is a world of dementia. And when things happen, it's because the residents themselves are confused. And if something doesn't upset a resident, I think take a deep breath and recognize that if it's not upsetting your mother, try not for you to be upset about it. Like I say, if your mother is not agitated that someone's wearing her robe, don't make a state case out of it. Just sort of let the staff know, hey, by the way, Marjorie's wearing my mom's bathrobe. Can you move it back when you have a chance? And I think that's the kind of the way to approach those types of things. Focus on what's important to your family member, for example, the wardrobe, clothing, activities. Again, it was a tough road for me and my father, but my mother was always beautifully dressed, very put together. And of course, in memory care, we had to change, we couldn't send her stuff out to dry cleaning, right? So we got some nice clothes at Kohl's, I think, that, colorful things that kind of pull up and pull down and sweatshirts. And, things would spill and we do our best to clean and do this. But I recognized that at a certain point, my mother just wasn't really aware that maybe she wasn't perfectly put together. And so as tough as it was sometimes to see that, because obviously, buildings try their best to make sure the hair is done and the teeth are cleaned and all this other stuff. I also had to recognize that, hey, they'll get to it, we'll get the fresh, blouse on, and these things happen. And again, try to let go of this. But on a positive note, and I want to kind of share this thing is, be open to surprises. My mother loved the finer things in life. She would go to Nordstrom's for lunch with her French girlfriends, and she liked nice clothes and nice things and liked opera and classical music. Well, one time I walked into memory care and I think they were playing Hee Haw, that old, pretty terrible TV show, with talking mules and hee haw and sort of silly things and square dancing. And my mother was having the time of her life. She loved every minute of it. So remember that if you say to the staff, now, mother won't do this, mother doesn't like that, mother won't do this, that actually with dementia, sometimes things change. They forget that they don't do that. And they might actually be more open to new experiences than we recognize. Now, guilt is something that I think should be part of this presentation. Again, most of us don't feel so great about moving grandmother out of her beloved house or making these decisions, but we know we have to for their benefit. So accept that really, I think good caregivers do feel guilty about things that they can't quite do, or guilty about things that they maybe aren't, maybe you can't visit as much as you'd want. I always want to say, be kind to yourself, recognize that you're doing the best you can. You are really doing a wonderful thing for your family member by inviting them and encouraging them and making it possible for them to live in a nice neighborhood where they can be safe, secure, and valued, where there's activities, where there's music, where there's friendship, where they're getting personal care. This is really, I think, so important, this socialization that can come with assisted living. And again, just try to enjoy every day with your family member. Focus on being in the moment. There may be certain topics and sadnesses and issues, but in the moment, they really want your presence. There's laughter, there's time together, and often there can be a lot of joy, even with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So, one person who has sort of been on my mind lately, the amazing Rosalind Carter and her husband, Jimmy Carter. I don't remember how old she is now, but well into her 90s. But Rosalind Carter got a lot of very positive attention for her kind of post First Lady work, just as Jimmy Carter got a lot of attention. Some people felt he was a better, ex-president than he was even a president. But Rosalind Carter had founded the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving. And I just love this connection, this kind of quote here that she says, that kindness is the connection that links us all together and strengthens the bond within our communities, neighborhoods, and families. So hopefully you'll have this spirit of kindness going forward, and as will the staff and this wonderful therapeutic community we have in Dementia Care. So I'll do my 1-minute plug, which is if you need to find out more about my work or want to find out more about my work, I'm at bestfriendsapproach.com is my website. If you're on Facebook, you can put in a little search engine the words Best Friends Approach and like it. It's my professional page, and I have lots of articles and materials I sent out. There's one of my more recent books for professionals. And Era Living, of course, you can learn more about their memory care program, eraliving.com memory care. And I recently recorded some little vignettes for the website. I don't know if they're up quite yet, but stay tuned. I'm sure they'll be there soon. So thank you for letting me talk with you about this topic that often isn't talked about enough. And I hope I gave you some good ideas, whatever your current situation is. So I'll be happy to answer some questions on the chat room or any way, Julie, you want to organize things. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that so much. We do have a couple questions in the chat box. The first one is, and this I think is just kind of a general question. It's going to be difficult for you to answer for specific communities, but it says, how are COVID precautions and facility outbreaks changing the socialization experience in memory care?
Really tough. And, obviously, we want to keep people safe. And of course, the PPE, the face mask, the mask are not terrific for engagement. But, when it comes right down to it, I think there's a misnomer out there that we have to somehow have the medical model at all costs. And the medical model is somehow in opposition to the social model. I think they both can work well together. You can keep people safe and healthy while still engaging them. So, a creative company like I think Era Living gets a shout out for being creative and committed here. Make sure there's lots of music. I like to say staff can still kind of talk with their eyes, with their hands, with their gestures. People sometimes will carry a picture. Hi, it's David. I'm your caregiver today. Little 1 and 2 minute engagements, visiting people, talking to people, complimenting people, taking time outdoors. So there's no doubt that the COVID pandemic has been a setback to dementia care around the country because some organizations have just stopped everything and just focus on infection control. And that's not, I think, really the right thing to do. We want to, with dementia care, keep people healthy and safe, but also, do as much as we can to engage them in therapeutic activity. So yes, it's been a setback. We know that people with dementia have been disproportionately affected, but with the COVID and deaths, loneliness and isolation is tough. But, again, if you're the staff and you're making your rounds and saying hi to people and giving a little hand rub and visiting with people, that all adds up to a lot of attention.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is, how should we be talking about the transition before the actual move to prepare our loved one for the sudden change of environment?
Super. So a couple of thoughts I have about that is I always like to start with the truth, and just put it out there. Hey, mom, the doctor said you've got some memory loss and, we need to talk because I don't think it's really safe for you to be at home anymore. You've overflowed the bathtub and I'm a little worried about this neighbor who keeps coming by and, some of the crime happening. Maybe it's time for us to find a really good spot for you to kind of enjoy with friends and things like that. So I would always try to kind of start with the truth. Now, we know that people with dementia have poor judgment, the reasoning, the forgetfulness. People might, of course, often say no. So then I think you just have to begin to rely on people like your doctors, your lawyer, your rabbi or priest or minister. Sometimes that kind of outside party can say things. I'm a fan of geriatric care managers you can hire and actually do an assessment. So those are things that happen. I think sometimes families will do like a respite stay for a couple of weeks. And then even though I don't like it, there are families who just kind of put their deposit down, say, mom, this is the way it needs to be. And, and kind of present it as sort of a done deal. It's really tough. It's painful, but you have to remember that they're not able to really make a good decision at this point. And if it helps you at all, I like to think of a concept from ethics called substituted judgment, where if a person's impaired and they can't really weigh in, we can actually say, what would my mother have wanted? And the odds are that if your mother is now driving unsafely, about to run over neighborhood kids, running around town with no dentures, if your mother was such a thrifty saver, suddenly is getting scammed by neighbors or even other family members for money, if you could say, what would my mother have wanted me to do about this 25 years ago? The odds are your mother would have said, act and do something. I will mention there's a great book I like about moving a relative with memory loss by Lori White and Beth Spencer. And maybe we can send that link out later. I think Era Living might even have a few copies, but there's a book, Beth Spencer, Lori White. I think they've retitled it lately, but it's sort of moving a relative with memory loss. and other transitions in care. Maybe someone can put that in the chat box for me from Era Living, but that's a very nice resource. It's reasonable. I think it's like 22 bucks on Amazon, or I think Era Living might even have a few copies. Lori White and Beth Spencer.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, I don't see any more questions. So David, I just want to thank you again for your time. We really appreciate this. This is such a unique time in people's lives and such a difficult thing for a lot of people to navigate. And you know, we're very grateful that you are able to kind of help guide us through this. Oh, wait a minute. I have another question. So Mr. Laird says, thank you for your examples, which are very helpful. I want to ask about your experience with right to die issues in memory care and how often.
Super. Well, I'll just say a quick comment on that. That might be an interesting webinar to talk about, the issue of the right to take your own life under certain conditions is something that I think many states have legalized, I guess, including Washington State, if I recall. Yes. And there's a whole protocol with that. In general, the dilemma with dementia is that you have to be able to give informed consent. My powers of attorney can't decide to end my life. I have to do it. And when somebody has Alzheimer's disease or dementia, they have a slow progressive illness where at a certain point they may lack capacity to make that decision. So it's a very tough dilemma with dementia. I think people are working on the ethics of this issue. And maybe that's what I can say for now, is that it's very tough. I think talk to your family members about it. Yeah, it's not an easy issue. And some of you may recall that Dr. Kevorkian, his first patient was a woman named Janet, I think Atkinson, who was actually a younger onset person with Alzheimer's disease, which was a very, I have very mixed feelings about that whole experience. Because again, it's, we hope people with Alzheimer's can still live many years with good quality of life. But it's a tough one. I see the other question. I'll just go right to it. I don't mind running a minute or two late here if there are more questions. Someone's being moved in a month. When would she talk? If someone is being moved in a month, when should we start talking about it? Great question. Well, in dementia care, I usually advise that if someone has a lot of forgetfulness and confusion, you probably don't want to bring things up a month or two early if it's going to cause agitation, conflict, and they're going to forget about it anyway. So if someone is still very capable of remembering things, you might want to go ahead and start the dialogue. If not, I think I would wait a week or two out and not do it a month out in general, because why create that conflict? But there's not necessarily a magic number there. It may depend on the person. And as I say, I've met some people with dementia who actually are pretty amenable, because remember that many of them do know that they're not what they used to be. Many of them know that they're struggling. And I've had people say, David, my mother was living by herself in this big house, and I think she was upset that she wasn't able to keep it up to her past standards. She was upset the yard was not looking good. And I think she actually enjoyed moving in memory care because it was a smaller, richer, more structured environment. And she didn't have the stress of trying to manage a house and be on her own and make those decisions.
Wonderful. All right, David, we're right at time. Thank you again so much. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day. For all of you here at the presentation, we're going to be emailing out an evaluation form. So we'd just love to hear some feedback on what you thought of the presentation. Again, if you have any questions about Era Living Memory Care, we'd love to chat with you about it. You can check us out at eraliving.com, or you can call 206-361-1989. Again, I'm Julie at Ida Culverhouse Broadview. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you on the next one.
Thank you, Reddy. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David.